Okay, welcome back. This is part two. We're going to talk about the irregular shape stuff and give it up for camera person. Hey, camera person. Okay. All right. So, benches and chairs basically fall into the same category. And what you're going to do is draw, for instance, like the bench, you're going to draw the component parts. So the bench is made up of the side and the back and the seat and the other side. And so zoom in the old camera here. I've already drawn the pieces on the foam core, and what I want you to notice is that the average height of a chair is about 3 feet. And of course you wouldn't draw the dimension lines on here, I just did that for show and tell purposes. The height of a seat to the top of the cushion usually is about 18 inches, which is exactly half of 3 feet for those of you who are aspiring mathematicians out there. So the part that is cross-hatched is not going to be cut out. So you see on this one where I just dashed it in, the shape is right here, but the reason that I showed this is because that is the thickness of the average size piece of foam core. Remember we said in the last lesson that the thickness of the foam core is about 3 to 4 inches in half-inch scale, and you have to allow for that anytime that's going to be a part of your height. So that cross-hatched place will represent where our seat goes, and so if you look at it on the one that's already made, that would represent the cross-hatched area, and then the part that is left over is what we're going to cut out. So you notice that the seat and the support is what equals 18 inches. You want to pay attention to those kind of fine details when you need to deduct the thickness of the foam core. So you'd go ahead and draw those two shapes on your foam core, and then you would use X-Acto knife to cut them out, series of passes. Remember too, if you want to include a little bit more detail in your bench, like a lot of times benches have the little rounded out area at the bottom, perfectly acceptable to draw that void in using a pen or a Sharpie. It's a whole lot easier to do before you cut it out than after you cut it out. That is my knuckle-headed dog, Joe Bear. You want to say hi to Joe Bear? Joe Bear? Okay. He doesn't understand fine quality art. So when you cut those pieces out, you'll have two of those. I went ahead and drew the seat for you. So there's the seat, and this is roughly 2 foot in half-inch scale and by 5 feet, I believe. So if you can zoom in there, I'll show you. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 half-inch segments. And so that's 5 foot by 2 foot seat, and then the back is approximately 1 foot by 5 foot. And you just cut all these pieces out. Now, it goes without saying that the smaller the pieces, the more carefully you have to cut. You can't get in a hurry with little small detail stuff. It's going to take several passes with much more pressure each time. Now, the only exception that I'm going to make is making tables. So here's the table. Now, this one is made up of a piece of styrofoam that is about 6 inches thick in half-inch scale. They use toothpicks for the supports, which is not horrible. It's actually a very easy solution. The problem with the toothpicks for a table is they are just a little tiny bit spindly. And so you might want to consider going ahead and upsizing to the little piece of balsa. The balsa wood in any shape, size, and variety is available from a craft store like Hobby Lobby. This particular one that came in this particular bag just happens to be, and I'm going to swap over to the actual scale rule, but if you zoom in on there, you can see that this particular one is about 2 inches thick in 1/2 inch scale. And so if you measure a chair or a table or something in your own house, you're going to see that they're not big chunky pieces of like 3 and 4 inch foam core, which this student used. And it looks okay, but if you're being absolutely correct, it would be a smaller piece of wood. And toothpicks are kind of nice because they just poke right into the foam. So the only exception to the rule of cutting if you have a circular table, and most of you have circular tables, in class we would have used our friend the tabletop scroll saw for this, but obviously you're not going to have one of those lying around. So again, go raid your mom's kitchen steak knife drawer, and if you find one that is a really small blade but also has the serrated edge on there, then you can, if you are very, very careful, you can use it to cut through the foam core, but you're going to make very slow passes. This particular table is about 4 feet in diameter, and just go very, 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 very slow. Keep it away from fingertips and things like that. It's very, very likely that it's going to tear just like mine did. And so that's when you get it down to a little piece like that. Use your handy dandy X-Acto knife, and you go ahead and just trim the little piece up. You wouldn't want to use the X-Acto knife on a curve over a long distance, just because it would be practically impossible. And again, get your sandpaper and you can hit your edges, and that would wind up being perfectly round. You do away with all the little rough little jupils there. And then it would be a simple matter of taking your stick. You want to make sure that they're the proper height. So the standard height of a table is about 3 feet. This will just be a fairly rough guess because your own research would indicate it, but there's 1, 2, 3 feet tall, but we want to deduct the thickness of the foam core, so back here somewhere. And then these are easy enough to cut where you could actually just use a pair of scissors, snip off the end. And so you're going to wind up having a leg that's about like that. Stick in the foam core. If you need to, you can give yourself a little poke hole. Stick the leg or the toothpick in there. You want to make them as straight up and down as you possibly can. Then you just take a little dab of glue and you can glue that in, let it dry. Once it dries, yes, you could just have the table sitting there, but honestly that's going to be kind of boring. So what you can do is find a little piece of flimsy fabric. The flimsier the better, something like silk or satin or some sheer piece of material, and you can actually create a little tablecloth. So I've already, here's a fun math tip for you. If you don't think that you're ever going to use math in real life, does anybody know how to figure the circumference of a circle? Anybody? Anybody? I'm not going to put my cameraman on the spot. It's, you guys remember this one? Pi r squared. No, Mr. Cole, pi r round. I'm kidding. It's just a joke. But if on your calculator you know that the table is 4 foot in diameter, that means that the radius from the middle of it out to the end is 2 feet. So circumference equals, the circumference is all the way around the circle, pi r squared. That means 3.14 times r squared, which in this case is 2 times 2, which is 4. So 3.14 times 4, and you wind up with somewhere around 12.5 feet. And so if you were to draw 12.5 feet on a piece of paper, cut it out, you would see that if you wrapped it, get my big finger out of the way, if you wrapped it around the table, that you would have just enough tablecloth. Now, of course, you can guess. Guessing is perfectly fine. But if you want to be precise, that's how you be precise. So the other thing that you can do before you cut out your paper is remember drawing in the void. So you take your pen or your Sharpie, draw you kind of a little ragged edge on one end and a couple of lines. And that way, when you go to wrap your table, glue it right there on the edge. And when you go to wrap your table, it has this nice sort of tablecloth quality to it. And then you don't really wind up seeing how ugly or how spindly the legs are. Of course, tablecloths usually don't go all the way down to the floor, so you might want to cut yours up a little bit higher. If you use a colored piece of paper or what have you, you can do all kinds of patterns on there if you want to go to that extra step. So the other thing that I want to show you is if you have a goofy shaped piece of furniture like this grand piano. So the easiest way to do this is remember when you drew your 1/4 inch scale version off the template and then we blew it up 200% so that you could find the size of your floor plan? Well, that's the 200% shape of furniture that would be maybe possibly on your floor plan. If it's not, then you know how to blow it up 200%. But what you would do, what this particular student did is the lid was made out of foam core, and then the actual piano shape was made out of a piece of styrofoam. And then the legs are a piece of balsa wood. They are approximately the size of a square piece of foam core, which is what you could use too. So little spindly, like a toothpick thing for the thing holding open the door. And so that's how you make irregular furniture, is just use the 200% blown up version. And then the last thing that I want to show you, this would be for anybody who's doing railings. I'm thinking of Mo now, can't remember, maybe Adrian, but if you have some railings, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to draw them to scale on your foam core. So in this particular case, I drew this railing is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a little longer than 7.5 feet. And it is about 3 feet tall. 1, 2, 3. And so what I did, is create a motif that I could use as the railing piece, and just I would repeat that across my drawing, and then everywhere that is in between the railing, to keep you from having to cut all that out, you can just take your friend the Sharpie and you can fill in those voids. And then again, it's easier to do all that before you cut it. Once you have it all drawn, then you just cut that out as a shape ready to go railing. The key to this furniture business, especially the irregular shape stuff, is it's all going to take time to dry. So don't try to rush through it. The neater and the tidier that you can make the artwork, the happier you're going to be with your work, and just the better it's going to look. This is a practice of time, patience, and effort. And you've heard me say that once, you're going to hear me say it about 300 million more times. Time, patience, and effort is what's going to rule the day. So not nearly as interested in, for instance, this is a yellow tablecloth with spindly legs, as I am, did you really take the effort and try to do something that is presentation worthy? So that's part 2. That's irregular furniture. The next thing that we're going to look at is going to be levels and stair units. I know that will apply to a couple of you. We'll talk about that the next time.